You good to go?
Do you have water anywhere?
I do. Perfect. He's getting you a bottle of water. All right, guys, welcome back to class. We're gonna this is gonna be the continuation, and this is gonna consider night 2. So we're doing nights 1 and 2 classroom tonight, and then we're gonna do classroom number 3 tomorrow night, as well as pool 1 and 2 tomorrow night as well. So we're kind of doing it a little bit differently than normal, but it's definitely a good way to go. So one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is as you guys start thinking about your dive journey, one of the things we have here is we have our master diver and dive guide master dive mentorship program. And what that means is we find people who are interested in going to that next level and becoming a master diver or a dive guide, dive master. Now, there's 2 types of dive guides. There's the professional dive guides, the ones that I employ in the shop here to help me, and I lovingly call them my low-paid tank monkeys. But we also have non-professional dive guides. The only difference is if you're on insurance or not. And whether I can use you or not. So if you're on insurance, I can use you. If you're not on insurance, I can't use you. But as a non-professional dive guide, it means that you have the opportunity to be able to lead friends and families. One of the people that if you're going to go diving a lot, becoming a dive guide is definitely to your advantage. If you have a family that you're diving with, becoming a dive guide is a good idea. And we do it as a mentorship program rather than a class where we put our arm around you and we help you through the process. Some of the gentlemen in the back, we've got Derek, we've got Brian, we've got Chase. They're all dive guide in the mentorship program and working their process. David in the back is a fantastic assistant instructor and went all the way from open water diver with me last year to assistant instructor now. Tell me about what did you think about the assistant or the dive guide program and the mentorship program?
So doing it as a mentorship has some huge advantages. Mostly that when you're first getting certified, you don't really know what you're getting into. You're just like, yeah, I want to go see the fishes. I want to see the coral, that kind of thing, right? There's so much more under the water than most people will ever see or realize. A lot of the dives that we go on, he talked about the Michael Phelps swimmers, the guys who want to just see everything. The more you try to see, the less you're going to see. My favorite thing to do is take people out for their first fun dive. And so we're swimming along, and I'll be kind of pointing stuff out and stuff, and I'll be like, so how many crawfish did you see? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I saw like 1 or 2 that you didn't point out. And I'm like, did you see the 700 I didn't point out? You know? And so having somebody who knows what they're doing, who's done all this before, who knows what you're going through, to kind of help guide you through the process really helps to focus you in a direction rather than just being like, yeah, I'm going to go scuba dive, but I don't really know what I'm going to do when I get there. I'm just going to kind of kick around and see what I see. So having that mentorship program really helps make it a much more thorough experience rather than just an experience.
So what we do is we'll sit you down and we figure out what classes would be best for you for your journey. And as you saw for the things I can teach, I think right now I can teach 36 specialties and then all the way through extended range and tech, side mount, twin sets. There's not much, I'm probably the most qualified instructor with about 500 miles here. There's nobody that teaches more than I do around. And all the way through ice diving, dry suit, search and recovery, search and rescue, and stress and rescue as well. So we help you figure out what those courses would be most beneficial to you, and we encourage you with those, and I teach you those directly. But we do it as a mentorship program. The Master Diver program with SSI is pretty cool. When you get certified this year, if you were able to get to the 50 dives and the 4 specialties plus stress and rescue this year, before the end of the year, you are automatically entered into a drawing for a live aboard trip for 2 on an aggressor. So they do that every year, and you get an automatic entry into that if you can make Master Diver in the first calendar year. So that's kind of the fun thing we do. If you're interested in that, please talk to one of my dive guides, one of my candidates as well, or myself. We're more than happy to work with you as well. Now, one of the things that's going to happen as well is tomorrow I'll get up and I will send a text message out to the group. So there will be a group text message. You will have my cell phone number as well as everybody else's. If you have questions, ask it in the group. Text it. Call me directly. You'll find I'm pretty approachable and easy to work with as well. I teach a lot, but I do have a day job, but I'm a consultant, so which means I pretty much sit around and just talk to people anyway. So I'm pretty easy to talk to and easy to reach. Go ahead and go to the next. So overall, part 2 of this, some of the cool things. I am an assistant instructor trainer. I also teach extended range. What does extended range mean? And this is, people say I get a little too technical sometimes. I'm sorry. Extended range means that I want to stay down for as long as humanly possible, and I don't want to come back. So that means I want to be able to go out and do 3.5-hour dives in one dive. I want to be able to go to deep shipwrecks that are 150, 175, 200 feet. So that's what extended range, and that's what I teach. Is I can teach here in state. I can teach you to go to 150 feet for as long as you feel like you want to go, as long as you can carry the tanks. So I can teach you to use up to 6 tanks in one dive. So that's what that means. If you're interested in going that direction, I know for me, when I started open water, day 2 of open water, I knew that that's where I wanted to be. I just didn't realize I would have to become an instructor to be able to get dive buddies. So that's why I became an instructor, because I wanted dive buddies. Next slide, please. These are some of the fantastic people that have gone through my course and our other assistants. You may or may not see, but this is, they've all gone through the mentorship program or some state of it. Ryan is now an assistant instructor. Stephen is a dive guide. Ben is still working to become a dive guide. I like Ben. He's a good guy, big goober. Don's a good guy. He's still working on it. David's an assistant instructor, but we'd love to have you in our program. And what that means to you guys with the program is that you get to come out and do more dives. That's one of the reasons these guys are here is they come out, they get to see the classroom, they get to get in the pool, they get to practice. Brian, how important have you found the pool time to be for your open water diving? One of the things you guys will find is this is a lot like teaching your 12-year-old to drive a stick shift. Absolutely, at the first lesson or first 2 or 3 lessons, they will absolutely be able to get started and stopped. But as we all realize, they won't be an expert, right? They will not be ready to run the Indy 500. So it takes time. Time and experience is a huge thing. Now, if you're interested in after this class and once you get your own gear, there's another course you can also take called Perfect Buoyancy, and we will help you get that perfect point of buoyancy. We play some games, we shoot some dice, we stack some rocks, we have some fun. That we, in the process, we Miyagi you through and become perfect buoyancy experts. Next slide, please. There is a progression program with this, and as you guys move along, we talk about that gamification. If you do 2 specialties and do 12 log dives, you become a specialty diver. After 4 specialty programs and 24 log dives, you'll become an advanced open water diver. And after 4 specialty programs, 50 log dives and stress and rescue, you will be a master diver. And once you do that, you'll be, this was last year, but they've got one going this year as well. It's the exact same thing. Turks and Caicos on Aggressor 2 for 7 days, all expense paid. So kind of a cool way to go. Other courses that you can take. Now, as we got to go through this, guys, who would like to be able to dive longer, less surface interval, safer, and have more energy after the dive? Does any of that sound interesting? Then nitrox is absolutely for you. We can do that in conjunction with this course. The add-on for that is about $100. No, I shouldn't say about, it is $100. You pay it to the shop. I make 0 on that, by the way. We do a Zoom class together. It takes about 2 hours to do the Zoom class, and on day 2 of your open water, you will dive nitrox. With nitrox, you will have less surface interval, safer dives, and you will absolutely have more energy after your dive. I encourage it for everybody. Other courses I like, navigation, deep dive, and night and limited viz can be taught in one group, but it's a great way to go. With deep, you'll increase your depth to 130 feet from 60 feet. Night and limited viz will give you your night dives, and navigation will allow you to be able to find your way back after the dives. Fun dive for you. I was diving in Honduras one time. We were doing a night dive. It was about 9, 10 o'clock at night, and Nikki and I were together. We had our flashlights on. We had them on red, and we're kicking along, and we came across this lobster, and I kid you not, he was this big. His tail was about that big. It was the biggest lobster I'd seen. His tail was literally bigger around than my arm. I was like, wow. And he had these huge antennae, and he's just doing his little lobster walk. Doop, 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 doop. We had our red lights on so he couldn't see us, and I came up behind him, and I touched one of his antennae. It was great. He didn't have claws, and he turns around. He's like, oh, what the hell? And he stopped, and he just froze, and he's like, what? And he finally turned. He started doing his little lobster walk. And I came on his other side. I touched the other one. He's like, what the hell? It was great. And that same dive, we kept coming along. We went over to a reef, and we saw this octopus, and the octopus was doing his cool little octopus walk. And he touched a piece of brain coral, and he's like, all of a sudden, I mean, like that, he encompassed over top of it. discovered it wasn't food, and then he came off it, and then he touched a fish, and he compassed over the fish and killed and ate the fish. He was probably, I don't know, head to tentacles about like that, probably about this big around. Really cool. Another time I was doing a night dive off some breakers off the coast of Maui, and I was with a buddy, and it was dark, and we came up to this reef, and we came across a squid, and I kid you not, the squid was probably this big. He was as long as I was. He was about this big around. He's this really, really beautiful maroon, just prettiest shade of maroon you've ever seen. And he's just kind of doing his kind of float, his squid float. And at about 3 or 4 minutes, I was, okay, I've seen the maroon squid. And I told my buddy, I says, I'm going to go swim around the reef. There's this reef that we were right around, this big turtle reef, right? It's probably the size of this room. Well, I come back around the reef, and I look over, and my buddy's still there, but there's this beautiful blue, this royal blue squid, the same size. And I was like, holy crap. It's weird to see one squid on a dive, but 2? And I asked my buddy, I'm like, 2? And he's like, 1. It was the same squid. He changed colors. So the point of this story is there's really cool things that come out at night. If you're diving around here, the salmon spawn is a lot of fun. We do that a few more times this year at night. But the salmon get, the kokanee, 18, 24, 28 inches, 30 inches in that neighborhood. They're red, and they're fairly lethargic, and they're pretty. We've measured them from here to here, so however big that is long. So, and then they get really lethargic, and they get really stupid, and sometimes they'll come right up to your mask, and I've had them bounce off my mask. In fact, I was doing a night dive with it. I had 2 pairs of divers out, and we were at the stairs, and I was just tired. I've been diving all day. And so I just told them both, you guys over there, I can see their lights. I came to the stairs in about 17 feet and doing my safety stop. And I stopped, and I turned my light off, just closed my eyes, and I just relaxed. It was just fun to listen to my bubbles. About 2 minutes later, I turned my light off, and there was a big salmon right here. And I looked at him for the longest time, and he looked at me, and I thought, you're coming with me. And I grabbed him. And I had him. I was trying to get up to the top of the stairs. Turns out they're slimier and more powerful than you think. He swam away. So anyway, fun stuff comes out at night, fun to play with. Other cool courses, React Right, Diver Stress and Rescue is one of my favorites, and Science of Diving if you like the idea of what's going on. And if you have back issues, side mount is absolutely positively for you, and we can certainly talk about that as well in more depth. There's other cool things out there as well. Photo video is a fun one. I like to think of photo video as perfect buoyancy on Miyagi style, because you have to learn perfect buoyancy, but you learn how to take and stop and take good pictures as well. If you're under 10 or have under 10 in your household, there is the Explorer program, and they get to be junior scuba divers in the pool. It's a lot of fun. Shark ecology, fish ecology. Next slide. As you kind of move up the diamond of courses, there's dry suit diving, there's full face mask, and ice diving. I encourage doing all 3 of those at the same time. It's crazy how much warmer you stay with a full face mask. If you plan on diving around here, altitude diving may be for you as well, understanding what the difference is and atmospheric pressures and how altitude diving works. Independent diving is a fun course for me to teach. It's not so much for my students, because my goal is to teach you how to be task loaded and understand it, but how to dive by yourself, and then marine guide. And then when you're ready to get to the big stuff like I do, extended range nitrox, foundations, extended range side mount, advanced wreck diving, extended range and decompression procedures. I've got some students here tonight that are in the deco procedures course, as well as the extended range course. So David and Josh are both doing extended range and deco procedures. Chase is doing decompression procedures with me as well. So they're learning to be able to stay longer and enjoy more time underwater. So let's just jump into it. The purpose of a BC is what? Who's good? B, all answers? All answers are correct. Control your ascent and descent rates. So if you're going down too fast, you can add a little air and it'll slow you down. If you're wanting to stay off, keep from crashing the bottom, you can add a little air and it'll cause you to float. But it also maintain the buoyancy and also provides surface inflation. Now, most accidents can be avoided by knowing how to do 2 things. One of them is inflate your BC. The other one's ditch your weights. Every one of these BCs that you guys will be working with has ditchable weights. So knowing how to reach over, grab this handle, yank it out, throw it away, you'll become more buoyant. If you have less weight, will you sink as easily? If you have less weight, will you sink as easily? No, you're going to be buoyant. You're going to float. So next slide, please. The 3 basic rules of scuba stated in the proper importance are: D is exactly right. Breathe continuously, ascend slowly, maintain control, and never dive alone or beyond your level of training. One of the things I should clarify, I do teach a course called Independent Diving, Solo Diving. Truthfully, it's not really designed to teach you to dive by yourself. It's more designed to teach you to dive independently of others. It is a great course if you're going to be a dive guide, to be able to dive independently of others. So if there is a problem, you can solve your own problems without having to involve your buddy. So that's really what it's for. People use it as a solo. I use it as a by yourself diving as well. Now, I got to go over this again. First rule of scuba is what? Breathe continuously. I think I only have 41 more times I need to say that again. Ascend slowly, maintain control, and never dive alone or beyond your ability. So let's talk about buoyancy. Anybody remember a guy named Archimedes? Have you studied Archimedes in school yet? Have you heard that name? What do you know about the name? That it begins with an A? It ends with a Medes? So Archimedes was a physicist, basically, many, many moons ago, right? And he discovered a lot of interesting things. And the one he's noted for in scuba diving is one day the king came to him and basically said, hey, I think the jeweler screwed me over. I gave him a pound of gold and he gave me back a crown, but I do not believe that there's a pound of gold in the crown. I need you to prove it. Prove that there's less than a pound of gold in the crown. And Archimedes, being the guy he was, said, I can do that. He got home like every other guy and said, how the hell am I going to do that? And so he was thinking about it. And one day he's in the hot tub, and he is the king of the hot tubs and bubbling along. And he realized that as his big fat butt got in the bathtub, the hot tub, that it raised the level of the water. And so he thought, wait a minute, if I'm 200 pounds and I raise the water this much, what happens if there's somebody that's 200 pounds, but they're more dense than I am? Would they raise the water the same amount, less, or more? And so he started doing some experiments, and he realized that due to the density of an object, that different densities will buoy the water in different amounts. So it's not just the density, but it's the size as well. So an object will be buoyed by the equal amount that is pressed down. So as what you want to think about is in physics, an equal and opposite reaction. So an object will be buoyed by the same force that it's buoyed down. So that's what we're trying to tell you here. Now, how is this important for you guys? How do you think buoyancy might be important for you guys? Exactly. So that's basically what we're feeling with our BC is we're adding air to increase density, increase mass, so we're able to float, right? We're increasing our density and or decreasing our density and increasing our buoyancy. Next slide. So the effects of pressure underwater, this is where we get into Boyle's law. And there's a lot of different names we use. We use Boyle's and Archimedes and Pascal and Gay Lussac. Gay Lussac was a guy, what a horrible name to go to middle school with. What's your name? Gay Lussac. Oh yeah, I just see where that goes right now. So the idea is we're dealing with atmospheric pressure. We're dealing with, and we're going to theorize for this class that we're at 1 atmosphere of pressure. Now, truthfully, we're not because we're at altitude. But for the purposes of this class, I need to pretend we're at 1 atmosphere of pressure or 1 ATA. So the absolute pressure we're dealing with is the total pressure of everything around us. And that's 1 atmosphere of pressure. Now, as we descend in the water column, as we go down, we're going to increase that pressure to the point where we get to 33 feet. We're going to go to our 2nd atmosphere. Now, what's the difference in pressure between 1 atmosphere and 2 atmospheres? 2 times, it's twice, right? So what we can say is if we had a 1 cubic foot balloon at 33 feet and we let it back to the surface, how big would it be? 2 times, exactly. So it would be 2 cubic feet, right? So that's what we need to realize. Due to Pascal, we understand that the water will press equally in all directions. Now, this does it in more than just our tanks, our BCs, but it also does it in the gas we're breathing as well. But for right now, just to discuss this, if I go down if I'm down at 33 feet and I have 1 cubic foot of air in this BC and I start to ascend, what's going to happen to my buoyancy? Less or more? More, absolutely, because it's going to expand as it goes up. So it's important to understand that if I'm at 66 feet and I have a little bit of air in my BC and I start to swim the surface, for every foot that I go up in the water column, I'm going to become more buoyant, right? It's important to note that. Absolutely. So we're using that absolute pressure with around us, and it's going to expand. Simple enough? All right. Next slide. I'm not going to get too deep into that. But so the absolute pressure during diving is measured in freshwater every 34 feet, in seawater every 33 feet. So as we go down, we're going to increase. So 2 ATA is going to be a 50% pressure change or double, a 33% change from 2 atmospheres to 3 atmospheres, or 3 times the pressure, and down to 102 feet in freshwater to 4 atmospheres, or 4 times the amount of pressure. Now, as this pressure increases, we want to think about it. The gas that we're breathing. So the gas we're breathing looks like this, right? If this was 1 molecule of air, so what gas is the 21%? Good job. And what gas is the 79%? Nitrogen. Man, this is a sharp class. Have you guys in tech next week, man. This would be awesome. So at the surface, it's equal to this size, right? As we go down to, that's at 1 atmosphere. As we go down to 2 atmospheres, we have the same size molecule, but now what happens to the percentages of gas or the partial pressures of gas? They double. That's exactly right. It stays at the same fraction, but they double. So at 33 feet seawater and 34 feet freshwater, it's the equivalent of breathing 40% oxygen and 158% nitrogen. I'm going to be nice. I'm not going to make you do the hard math. What's the percentage of oxygen at 66 feet? What was it? It's going to be 3 times 21, so 63%. Easy enough? Now, one of the things to be aware of, as this gas that we're breathing comes into our system, our cell tissues, our tissue compartments want to equalize to that as well, okay? So they're going to want to equalize out to the tissue compartments, our fat, our skin, our lungs, our bone, our blood. Everything's going to want to equal out to a nitrogen load at this level of 158%. Does that make sense so far? Now, as we reascend in the water column, something's got to happen. We need to re-equalize to this lower partial pressure of nitrogen. So we're going to pretend this is a bottle of soda pop. I like using this instead of an actual bottle of soda pop. So if we're at 66 or 33 feet and we start to come up, and we come up too fast, the nitrogen will go into bubbles. What happens when I open the top? Shh, exactly. So in the 1800s in New York, they were building a bridge. Oh, I'm sorry. They were building a big bridge, right? The Brooklyn Bridge. And what they discovered is they had to send workers down to the bottom in something called caissons, these big domes, basically. And they were doing this bottom work, and they were sending them very deep. And they'd work down there for 12 hours. And then they'd pull them up, and they discovered that after about 15, 20 minutes of being at the surface, all of a sudden they'd double over in pain. They'd bend over in deep pain. Thus the term caissons disease, or the bends. Ding, 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 ding. You guys are smart. I love it. So that's where we get the term the bends. Well, what they discovered through this process, and being the brilliant guys that they were, well, when did the pain go away? When they sent them back down. So what should we do? We'll just have them work longer shifts. This is perfect, which actually exacerbated the problem and caused more people to die. But they didn't put those two together for quite a while. But that's what the bends are, is it's a buildup of nitrogen in our systems from being under pressure that's allowed to come out of our tissues too quickly. So remember we talked about that 30 feet per minute? This is why. We stay down for, we only come up at 30 feet per minute because it allows us to slowly take the cap off. Anybody had that jerk of a husband that, here, open this for me, honey, right? And your solution is, oh yeah? I'll do it really slowly. Ha ha ha, screw you, right? You do it really slowly, you let that gas out. So as the bubbles come out of your tissue into the solution, which is your bloodstream, they come out as what's first called bubble seeds. And then they become silent bubbles, and then they become symptomatic bubbles. As the bubbles become larger, they become more problematic, okay? In our next class, we're going to go through the problems and signs and symptoms of DCS a lot more. But that's how it works, and that's what the partial pressures that we're talking about work. So Boyle's law is continued into Henry's law, but that's basically what's happening is we're compressing everything around us. So absolute pressure is defined as, what was that? Yeah, the total pressure. Absolute or total pressure. By the way, this is Redfish Lake. This big rock behind me is School Bus Rock. So that's my, yes, ha, with school. There he is. That's my favorite one because that's over by the wall. One of the cool things about Redfish Lake is you get about 75 to 100 feet of viz. And if you dive the transfer between the transfer station and the main dock, there's a really sweet wall. You get down to about 130 feet and you can look down and you can still see 200 feet below you. It's really a cool wall. And if you are, gosh, from here to that cooler to the shore is probably 100 feet directly below you because it is a wall. It's very cool. So this is what we've been talking about, the effects of pressure underwater. So Boyle's law basically is P1 times V1 equals P2 times V2, or pressure and volume of one at the first equals pressure and volume at the second, right? Here's what's really happening. As pressure increases, volume decreases. As pressure decreases, volume increases, right? So as we look at the balloon idea, at the surface it's 1 cubic foot, half a cubic foot, a third, a quarter, and so on, right? And that's how we also recognize it out to 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar, 4 bar, 1 atmospheric pressure, 2 atmospheric pressures, and so on. The other thing to be aware of is that now our lungs my lungs are 2 liters at the surface, roughly. They're actually 2.2, but we'll say 2 for nice round numbers. How much volume do my lungs have available to me at 30 meters or 4 atmospheres? They're 2 liters at the surface. How much volume can they contain at 99 feet? How about this? I wear a size 12 shoe. At the surface, I wear a size 12 shoe. At 99 feet, how big is my foot? It's a size 12. My foot, my hand, and my lungs aren't going to change in size, but the density of the gas that I'm breathing absolutely does. Now, why is that important to know? That the density of the gas is going to change, but my lung size is not. Bueller? Why is that important to know that my lung size will still be 2 liters at 99 feet, but the density of the gas is going to be different? Why would that be important to me? It's going to expand, that's one. But how about the volume of gas? If all of a sudden I'm at 99 feet and my 100 cubic foot tank is equal to 25 cubic feet because the density of the gas is now 1/4. Will I go through more gas? Well, if my lungs are the same size, but it's taking 4 times as much, so I'll need more gas. So as you go deeper, what you're going to find is the gas is going to become more dense and you're going to need more of it. So a 100 cubic foot tank at 99 feet is equal to 25 cubic feet of air. And if I go through a cubic foot of air every 2 minutes at 99 feet, I'm going to go through a lot more gas, right? Than I am at the surface. If I'm at 2 atmospheres and that 100 cubic foot tank is now equal to 50 cubic feet, will I have more gas at 33 feet or at 99 feet? 33, yeah, I'll go through less gas at the shallower point. And the idea basically is as the pressure increases, I have the same amount of molecules just in a smaller space. So your 80 cubic foot tank has 80 cubic feet at the surface, only has 20 cubic feet of usable gas at 99 feet. Now, interestingly enough, I was reading on the world record dive the other day, and a guy dove to 1,000 feet, 1,038 if I remember correctly. He was determining he was going through a 100 cubic foot tank every minute and a half. He literally was getting 90 seconds after he got past 900 feet. He was going through a 80 cubic or 100 cubic foot tank about every 90 seconds. It was sucking him down like candy. So he had a crap load of tanks. So on a dive like that, just to give you an idea, it usually takes about 20 to 30 minutes to 40 minutes to get down, and somewhere between 20 and 30 hours to get back. They just did a guy that I know did a 804 foot dive on a rebreather in a cave in New Zealand. It was 32 minutes down to the 804 foot mark, and it was 16 hours back. And they built 2 habitats for him on the way back to do his decompression with. So interesting stuff. So, wouldn't you want to be the first person to go 800 feet in that cave?
No.
Fair enough. An object immersed in water will be buoyed upward by a force that is equal. Panic can be prevented by taking specialty training, honestly evaluating your diving skills and limitations, properly maintaining. Now, if you're interested in understanding more how panic works and stress works during diving, we have a stress and rescue course. It's a fantastic course. Our goal through the process, and when I teach it, I never yell. Josh has known me for, gosh, how long now? Yeah, a long time. Have you ever heard me yell? I'm just not that guy. Marine Corps or not, I just don't like to yell. But I promise you I can create situations that will stress you out. I promise you I can create, and my goal is to be that guy that you want to go to at the end of it to say, hey, how do we get past this? But it's a great course, and we'll talk to you about what stress looks like in you, how you work through it, and we'll create special situations to help you work through so that you know what it looks like and how to work through them. But making sure to take specialty training so the dives you're doing, you're qualified to do. Honestly, being honest about your skills. That's one of my biggest problems is I was unfortunately born without a major reflex. I don't get scared. It's just not my thing. There's a lot of guys that, get in a plane at 10,000 feet and look down and say, I shouldn't jump out. Me, I'm like, we should go. I just not that guy. Whatever it is, I just don't have fear in my life, and it's not served me well in certain situations. I can remember specifically being 19 years old in a bar at 32nd Street and feeling a lot braver with guys than I should have been. That's a story for a different time with some beer. But taking that honest evaluation of, am I able to do this dive? Is this something I'm capable of? Taking that honest evaluation is a big deal. Properly maintaining your diving system so it works. Had a diver out that just was kind of tagging along and hadn't maintained his equipment and had a valve stick open on his BC, so he was not able to add air to his BC at all. And got to the surface, and I saw him over doing the panic swim for a second because he'd been out hunting crawdads. Was able to get over to him and get him over the dock, and I got his weights out and got him buoyant again. But I'm like, what happened? And he's like, I don't know. And we got to look at his BC, and his valve had gotten stuck open. And so every time he added gas, it was stuck open. The exit valve was stuck open. So we had to take it apart and found the sand that was in it and got the sand out of it and got it put it back together. Next slide. Use my SSI logbook is important because all the answers are correct. One of the cool things about diving is it's a lot like flying. You're into flying quite a bit. Is a logbook during flying reasonably important? Yeah, absolutely. It's not that you're into flying, but you're around flying quite a bit. Why is it important to have a logbook? What kind of information is recorded? Exactly, maintain a record. So as you guys are going out diving, for example, when we do our dives in Ryrie on the 14th, 15th, we're going to be in a 7 mil wetsuit. We're going to need weight to get you down. Would it be in, Chase, how important was it for you to know how much weight to put in that BC with that 7 mil? Do we have anybody that had any challenges with that? Absolutely. So knowing little things like that, because now, can you honestly remember exactly how much weight you had on that day? Yeah. But if you don't dive for 6 months, if you don't dive for 6 months, would you remember that weight exactly? So record that kind of stuff. What kind of tank did you have? Did you have an aluminum tank? Did you have a steel tank? Was it cold water? How cold was the water? How did I feel during that dive? Recording that information is your lifeline. Good example. My wonderful daughter, who is 31, she's a beautiful and amazing soul, and I love her with all my heart. She's spectacular. She got certified by somebody else, and she lives in Florida. She actually worked for a dive agency, and I was coming out, and she says, I want to go diving with you, Dad. And I'm like, sweet, I want you to go diving with me too. And I says, when's the last time you went diving? She says, well, it's been about a year. I says, well, you need to go over and get an update. It's okay. And I got out there. She says, I didn't get the update done, but I'm good. I've got everything. And so she gives them she says, I'm cold. I get cold real easy. So she decided she's going to wear a 5 mil and a shorty 3 mil on top of that. And I says, you got everything? She said, I got everything. She worked for a major dive agency. I figured she was good to go. She got in and we were doing a drift dive. We got down and I couldn't find her. I'm like, what the hell did she go? And I spent the whole dive stressed because I couldn't find my kid. Got back to the surface. Turned out she'd got down 5 feet, couldn't get down, and got back on the boat. She was too buoyant. And I said, what the heck happened? She says, well, I didn't look at my logbook to see how much weight I needed for each wetsuit. Operator error. She and I had a very heart-to-heart point at that conversation at that point. As hard as I could be, the kind of dad that I am. I'm just not a yeller, and she's 31, so you don't spank 31-year-olds anymore, unfortunately. I'm getting the belt, damn it! No, I never was that dad anyway. If only. There are times. I know I love my kids, and if they're watching, I love my kids with all my heart. They're amazing. But taking into account and logging that information. So when we get done with our dives, we're going to pull out our nice little SSI app, and we're going to put that stuff down. And you can put down things that you saw as well. Where did you dive? What was the temperature? What was the time? What tank was I had? How much gas did I start with? How much gas did I end with? Is that important to know, be able to kind of figure out how you consume gas? Right? How sucky would it be to have a car that you don't know how much gas mileage it has, and all you had was a gas gauge on it, and you're trying to take a trip cross country? But does it get 3 miles a gallon? Does it get 20 miles a gallon? Does it get 50 miles a gallon? You're just not able to make a plan. So if you're able to plan that stuff in advance, it's definitely to your advantage. Oh, we do get into this tonight. I forgot. So the effects of pressure underwater, we talked a little bit about this, but tonight we're going to talk about arterial gas embolism. This is going to be the scariest section. I'm sorry. I will go as briefly as I can through it and make it as scary and as humanly possible. So we're going to talk about arterial gas embolism, mediastinal emphysema, subcutaneous emphysema, and pneumothorax. Next slide, please. So basic respiratory system. Here's what happens. As we're breathing in air. It goes into the trachea, down the into the lungs and goes into the lung structure. In the lung structure, it's uptaken by the alveolar. Okay, how many alveoli do we have in our lungs? Anybody know? Lots is kind of a general number. What does lots mean to you? 600 is one guess. Okay. Brian, do you remember? Derek, I'm sorry. Jace, you remember? 300 million. 300 million little sacs that their whole job is to transfer the air that you're breathing in into them and into your bloodstream so that it can go out to the extremities and back in. That process is the profusion process. It profuses in, goes into the bloodstream, and profuses into your tissue compartments. Now, a physicist in the 50s determined that there was about 16 different tissue compartments that uptake that gas in different speeds. That's not important for now, but it gives you kind of interesting. Now, as it comes out, it diffuses out. So once it's ready to come out, the bloodstream catches that bad gas and it brings it back through the bloodstream, out through the heart, back to the alveolar, and it's exhaled. So as we talked about that partial pressure, that higher pressure of nitrogen is it's reducing in pressure. What's happening is it's literally coming into the bloodstream, hitting the alveolars, and we're exhaling it with every breath naturally. Next slide. We already talked about this one. So the big deal that we have, and one of the reasons we always want to make sure we're breathing, is we've got two big balloons in our chest. Now, as we saw with pressure, as we come up, 1 cubic foot from 33 feet becomes how much at 0? From 2 atmospheres or 33 feet, 1 cubic foot is how much at the surface? From 2 atmospheres to 1 atmosphere, 1 cubic foot of air becomes 2. Yeah, it becomes 2 cubic feet of air. Now, interestingly enough, it only takes 4 psi to pop your lungs if they're fully expanded. Actually, I take that. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. It's actually 2 psi. 2 psi, and you change 1 psi for every 2 feet. So you can actually get an overexpansion injury by holding your breath and coming up 4 feet. That's all it takes. So never hold your breath. Always breathe. It'll continue to work correctly. So, so to kind of go through the most dangerous of all these is going to be the arterial gas embolism. This is when air escapes from the lung structure and gets into the bloodstream. When an air bubble gets in, now, any of us 80s kids out there, every murder mystery out there had somebody going into the hospital with a big hypodermic needle, stabbing them with a hypodermic needle, shoving it full of air into their bloodstream and causing them to have a heart attack. Remember those? Every single one. It was like Quincy and every one of them. So basically that's what's happening with an arterial gas embolism. Air is escaping from overexpansion from the lungs and it's getting into the bloodstream. Now, as these bubbles get into the bloodstream, bad things happen. Now, if we're being honest with ourselves, we're probably going to be in the vertical position. Where are these bubbles going to go? Into the brain. And so they cause different problems. They can cause you to stop breathing, vertical distortions, visual distortions, nausea, disorientation, slurred speech, any of those, convulsions. Any of those things are absolutely things that can happen. And arterial gas embolism typically make their way to the brain first. Now, the next one is called a mediastinal emphysema. Now, this is where air escapes into the chest cavity. It perforates from the lungs and gets in the chest cavity. Now, this is actually a fairly common thing to happen during car accidents, where there's an excessive amount of pressure from an airbag, hits the chest, and it causes air to escape from the lungs into the mediastinal cavity. Typically, it presents with a larger one side of the chest versus the other, difficulty breathing, anything like that. And that's what happens. Same thing can happen with overexpansion injury. Air will escape from the lungs into the mediastinal cavity, into the chest, and it'll actually cause pressure on the lungs or the heart, causing you decreased ability to breathe and causing your heart decreased ability to actually do what it's supposed to be doing. Subcutaneous emphysema. This is where air escapes from the lungs into the subcutaneous or into the skin structure. Typically, it will present around the throat with expansion around the throat, causing it to break around the trachea and causing reduced amount of breathing. You'll see it'll generally present very largely around the neck. You'll see the lips puff and puffing under the eyes as well, are typical signs of mediastinal emphysema or subcutaneous emphysema. And the final one's the pneumothorax. This one's just as bad. This is where it escapes below the skin, but above the trachea point. And it actually will cause the trachea to be compressed as well. Now, next slide. What do we do? Oh, let's go back. What do we do on any one of these? Arterial gas embolism, mediastinal emphysema, subcutaneous. Somebody presents to you on the dive boat that they are not able to breathe. They're disorientated, visual distortions, nausea, slurred speech, puff one side of the chest versus the other, puff around the neck. What do we do? Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, it was very good, actually. Absolutely. And that's really all you can do is treat for shock. Get their legs up, get the pressure off them, relax them, and treat for shock by putting them on oxygen. Now, the good news is any quality dive boat should have an oxygen kit on it and should have somebody trained in that as well. When you go diving with me, my wife and I keep 2 bottles of oxygen in the back of my truck, as well as an AED. 58% of dive maladies are cardiac related. So my wife and I actually own our own AED, just so we can teach students to be safe. But that's what you do is you put them on air. Then call first aid. Call and get an ambulance. This is where a big deal having DAN insurance could come into play, because a helicopter ride to a chamber is going to be $10,000, $20,000, right? About that? Or more. And a trip in a chamber is going to cost you $10,000 to $20,000 as well. For $300 a year, Dan will cover all of that for you. So, $300 versus $50,000, you decide. It's up to you. But that's how you're going to treat for it. Always, the treatment for most accidents is going to be put them on oxygen, treat them for shock, monitor, and call 911. Easy enough. Now, when I get on a dive boat, one of the things I ask to see is I want to see their active oxygen bottles. I ask. There was a dive accident about 6 months ago in the Caribbean where they went to get the oxygen bottle. It was in a box where the lock was rusted shut and nobody knew where the key was at. True story. Yeah. So make sure you see that stuff. Don't be afraid to ask. I am the worst guy on a dive boat because I want to actually be on a dive boat that's safe. We were on a dive boat, it was about a year ago. It was a recreational boat. We'd ordered nitrox, and I told the dive master I needed to analyze my tanks, and he looked at me and says, "Why?" This is because it's not air. I need to verify what's in the blend. He says, "But I analyzed it." I says, "That's great. I need to analyze it." He says, "But I'm a retired firefighter." I said, "Thank you for your service, but I need to analyze my tanks." He says, "You don't trust me?" "Nothing for nothing. I met you about 2 minutes ago, so no, I don't trust you. Thank you very much for your service, but I need to analyze my tanks." And he actually said it again. He says, "But I'm a retired firefighter." "Thank you for your service. I'm a retired Marine. I still want to analyze my damn tanks. I want to see the safety." Don't be afraid to ask for the safety. It should be there. Next slide. So, overexpansion injuries can be prevented by never hold your breath is probably the biggest one on there. Overexpansion injuries are prevented by always breathing, and treatment is just what we talked about. The most serious lung overexpansion injury is what? Yep, said it right there at the beginning. The most dangerous is an AGE or arterial gas embolism. So decompression sickness. We talked a little bit about this briefly, but we'll just go over it again. Nitrogen. What we're breathing is 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen. So as we get to 2 bar or 1 atmosphere, 33 feet, we're now breathing 158% nitrogen, which is the challenging portion. That's what makes the bubbles that cause the bends, DCS, and 42% oxygen. Now here's your argument for nitrox. I mean, if we're breathing a blend of 32% nitrox, which means we're breathing 32% oxygen and 68% nitrogen at the surface, when we get down to 33 feet, now we're breathing 64% oxygen and only 136% equal of nitrogen. Anybody see the difference there? So if I drink less rat poison, will I be as poisoned? No, right? If I breathe less nitrogen, I have less nitrogen to come out of my system, right? So that's what we're doing, is we're breathing less of what's causing the problem. There's your argument for nitrox. So in the air at 1 atmosphere, the partial pressure of nitrogen is what? And the partial pressure of oxygen is what? Nitrogen and oxygen. Got an A over here. It's A. 79% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. The most effective breathing pattern for scuba diving is what? Who said it? B is exactly right. A balanced inhalation followed by a long balanced exhalation without any pause between. Breathe. All right, so here's what we came up with, and this is your argument for why to breathe nitrox. So back in the early 1900s, Charles Haldane came up with this idea of why we were getting DCS or the bends for the divers. And what he determined back then was when we got to a 2-to-1 ratio of nitrogen, when we were breathing twice the amount of nitrogen as we would at the surface, we started to get to the point where we could get the bends. We could get DCS. Well, the problem was he was kind of right and almost there, but not quite. So Robert Workman came along in the 50s and he said, wait. There's a better way to do this. And he came up with what's called the critical difference. And what he determined was it's not just a 2-to-1 pressure, it's a 2-to-1 pressure on nitrogen. So with nitrox, you reduce the amount of nitrogen in the blend, so making a safer blend. So you're able to go deeper because you're breathing less nitrogen. If you're breathing less nitrogen, you have less nitrogen to come out of your system, which means shorter surface intervals, more bottom time, and more energy after a dive. And here's why that. Because A, oxygen has a slight narcotic effect, which is kind of fun, but also your body has to work to process that nitrogen. It's processing it into the cells, it's processing it out of the cells. The average 60-foot dive for 50 minutes is equal to a very brisk walk for 50 minutes, for 5 miles. 50 minutes at 60 feet is equal to about a brisk 5-mile walk, cardiovascularly wise. So, and that's basically because of the on-take and off-take of nitrogen. So if you're on-taking and off-taking less nitrogen, you're going to have more energy because which takes more energy out of you? Walking through Walmart, doing a 50-minute grocery shop, or running the track at Idaho Falls for 50 minutes? Yeah, if you're doing more work, you're going to be more tired. So with nitrox, you're working less. Plus, you get the advantage of a little bit of that as well. Go back up. I'm sorry. So decompression sickness. What does that look like? There's 3 levels of decompression sickness that we need to worry about. The first one's called DCS1. It's called the skin bends. And what it'll present is a rash. And what happens is the bubbles are small enough, they're trying to get out through the skin, and they cause a rash, bumps and bruising rash. DCS number 2 is where I start to get joint pain. What's happening is the bubbles are coming in and they're getting trapped in my joints, and they're causing pain in there, as well as I could get nauseous as well, or muscle tiredness. So if you come out of a dive and you feel sore, there's a good chance you're presenting with signs and symptoms of DCS. Now, part of that soreness is kind of like, anybody ever had a cold where you felt real sick and you were laying on the couch? Well, the reason that happens is something is in your body and the white blood cells come out and they say, wait a minute, there's something in here that ain't supposed to be there. And they get in this little fight, right? And so the white blood cells are fighting the bacteria, the viruses, whatever, the bad things that aren't supposed to be there. And as they go to battle, anybody that's been in war will tell you, war ain't good. It makes everybody tired. It wears everybody out. That's what's happening in your system. Well, same thing's happening with DCS. You have these nitrogen bubbles kind of flowing around, and the white blood cells are like, wait, you aren't supposed to be here, dude. We're going to go at it, right? And so they have their little war, and they go at it. So that's, you like my little karate there? So they have their little war. That's why you get the muscle tiredness. And finally, DCS level 3 is the most serious. And this is where things like vertigo, disorientation, slurred speech, irritability, convulsions, passing out can happen because the bubbles have gotten soreness or tingling on one side, inability to use one side or the other. Bubbles are getting into places where they shouldn't be, and they're causing bad things to happen. That's where it gets to be muscular and neurological. So, which of the following would be an inappropriate treatment for a diver exhibiting symptoms of decompression sickness? A is exactly right. Why? Exactly. So if I've got on the boat, now typically DCS will take 15 to 17 minutes to start presenting after you've exited the water. So you're starting to sign, the last thing you want to do is take that person back underwater, because what happens if they have cardiac arrest? Then you pull out the AED at 33 feet, you give them the AED. It's just fun for everybody. Absolutely. No, don't use your AED underwater. That's just not a good thing. But you have no control. You can't administer CPR. You can't treat for shock. You can't hydrate. You can't monitor vitals. Don't take them back underwater. Proper ascent. Now, we're teaching you an initial to do the vertical ascent. So the first thing you want to do is we're going to come close enough together that if there's something that happens, I've got him. Now, when we go out to open water, here's a pro tip for you. If you are farther away from your buddy that you cannot touch them, I promise you, you will get to do extra skills. It is just my fun that I get to have that, and way of punishing you, that if you get too far away from each other, I promise you I'll come over to you, master drill number 1, let's see it. You'll get extra skills to practice to help you remember to stay arm's distance from your buddy. But you want to be that distance apart. So if he starts to rocket away, I can dump my BC and I can grab him. Whatever happens, he starts to run out of gas, I can give him gas. Whatever needs to happen, I've got him. Plus, he's just pretty. I just want to look at his just beautiful face and just enjoy that, right? So as we get ready to descend, are you okay to descend? We're going to be right here. We're going to dump a little bit of gas. Why do you think we want to dump a little bit of gas out of our BC before we ascend? It's become more buoyant, right? So as we're going to start heading up, we're going to become more buoyant. So we're going to dump a little gas, and we're going to fin our way to the surface. And we're going to make sure, just like we show in our little pictures here, that we've got good control over that as well. Now, there's something else we might want to monitor as we start to ascend. What do you think else we might want to monitor, other than to make sure that he gets to the bar in time so he can have his Chevets? I do. Or at least I used to. What do you think I should monitor? Depth, yeah. So I can monitor my depth. 30 feet per minute. And I can watch that. So the easiest way to do that, look at your computer and start to ascend. Most computers will have an ascent meter on it, but monitor that. Monitor your time. Make sure you're going slowly enough and that you're finally getting to that last point of 15 feet for your safety stop to allow that last gas to come off. So we're going to monitor each other. We're going to monitor our time. And if he sees me going too fast, he might, okay, slow down, let's go down, and monitor each other. We're buddies. And we're going to get that 15 feet, and we're going to stop for how long? 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, and that's the sign and symbol for it, 3 or 5 minute safety stop. Now, why do you think we're stopping at 15 feet for 3 to 5 minutes? What do you think? Love it. You guys are listening. It's amazing. So much different than teaching a bunch of teenagers. It's awesome. So we're going to stop at every dive, and we're going to do a safety stop. Now, question for you. Safety stop required, suggested, encouraged? Encouraged. It's kind of like a yellow light. We don't want to speed up at the yellow lights. We want to slow down and take advantage of that caution, right? So you should do a safety stop. And I'm going to encourage you guys to always, always do a safety stop. At least 3 minutes at 15 feet. Okay? Once you've done that and you've finished that up, you'll simply tell your buddy, are you good to go? And once you finish your safety stop, you get your buddy's attention. This means I've cleared my safety stop. That's all I'm telling him. And if he's not, if he has a minute left, he can tell me 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever. He can tell me, and I'll wait. You always stay with your buddy. If I finish my safety stop and he hasn't done that, I'm not just going to bolt and leave him. I'm going to stay with him until his safety stop is done. And then we're going to sit and finish the service. Yes, sir. How long you were down and how deep you were at. So the deeper the dive and the longer you were down, the longer you want to do. So to a maximum of 5 minutes. Good question. Very good question. Next slide. So nitrogen narcosis, the mistress of the deep. Nitrogen narcosis is when you get too deep, past 66 feet, or 60 feet. We're just make it a nice easy number for you. nitrogen starts having a slight narcotic effect. At 100 feet, that narcotic effect becomes more pronounced. Now, it's equal to 1 martini on an empty stomach for every 33 feet after 100, and it increases exponentially. So at 100 feet, it's equal to 1 martini on an empty stomach. At 130 feet, it's equal to 5 martinis on an empty stomach, roughly, depending upon your tolerance to it. Some people are more nitrogen resistant than others. As a prevention of it, use nitrox. With nitrox, you're breathing a lower percentage of nitrox, and it's like drinking less beer. If you drink less beer, you get less hangover the next morning, right? Pretty simple. The treatments for it: ascend to a shallower depth. That is the treatment for nitrogen narcosis. So if you go to the next slide, I've got a nice video for this.
It's like being drunk underwater, but you don't get any of that hangover. Some divers get narked easier than others. It just depends on how deep you go and how susceptible you are to the calls of the nitrogen mistress. Now, as you all probably know, some people do pretty stupid stuff when drunk. All you have to do is visit your local drunk tank at the police station on a Friday night and ask what they're in for. Or if you're the one in the drunk tank, the cops will tell you why you're there in the following morning. But people do some stupid stuff when narked, and most people don't even know they're narked. So it can be useful for you to understand some telltale signs that your buddy is narked, so that you can be the designated diver and look after them and get them home safely. And such, hi, I'm Mark, and here are 5 ways to tell if your dive buddy is narked. They keep staring at themselves in your mask. You're effectively drugged by the gas that you are breathing the deeper you go, and such your inhibitions are lessened. And as we all know, we are all narcissists at heart when we lose our inhibitions, aren't we? No. Guys. I mean, let's face it, I'll bet you anything that your social media picture is you scuba diving, isn't it? Narked men and women are like magpies, and they love shiny objects. And when they look at you, they're probably not actually looking and engaging with you. They're just looking at themselves or the mirror copy of themselves from the mirror dimension in the shiny lens of your mask. You find them buddy breathing with a fish. I've actually heard this a couple of times, and this is the other type of drunk, the considerate drunk. These narked individuals will be concerned at all of the fish in the water and their lack of breathing apparatus. After all, they've spent a lot of time learning how important their regulators are and to always keep breathing. So they'll often donate their regulator to these fish that, to be honest, they don't really need it. They wave back at fish. I would do that normally. Hey, birdie. The third type of drunk is the happy drunk, who is observant and sees his crowds of fans in the fishes and all their little fins waving at them, so it would be rude not to wave back, right? Yeah, if your buddy is waving back at the fish, they're probably narked, or, way too young to be scuba diving. Why are you looking at me? I'm not too young. Mental age. Fish are cool, and they move their pectorals pretty much all the time, but while they are aware that you are there, I'm sorry, but they ain't waving at you. They do get Finding Nemo and Dory. Documentaries, those were. Their mask fogs underwater, and they spit in it. Much like people who defog the outside of their mask before a dive, you aren't going to get much benefit of spitting in your mask during the dive. I have seen this before, and it was a dive guide, so I really hope he wasn't knocked at the time. I just figure he was showing off. Your mask fogs up, and he spits in your mask. Yeah, enough said. Considerate of them, but just stay away from my mask. I can do it myself. At least it's spit. Yeah, no. What have we seen for the rare water coast?
So now, nitrogen narcosis. Where do you think the first recorded case of nitrogen narcosis, how deep is it? That's one number? 60 feet. 66 feet. Depends on who you talk to. So magically, you guys are limited to 60 feet of depth. Nitrogen narcosis starts after 60 feet. Coincidence? I think not. So, next slide, please. So the last piece to talk about briefly, if we spend too long on oxygen, it can become toxic. Carbon dioxide buildup is more a common thing, and carbon dioxide can build up in several different ways. Hypercapnia, and the most common way hypercapnia builds up is through short breathing. So please, normal deep breaths. Next slide, please. There we go. So proper dive planning. Let's talk about some terms. I'm going to skip some of the end of this, and we're going to get into dive tables tomorrow, if that's okay. So proper terminology of dive table. The first one is going to be bottom time. How do we define bottom time during a dive? The beginning of the direct descent to the beginning of the direct ascent. Bottom time is defined as the beginning of the direct descent to when you start your descent to the point where you start the ascent. A repetitive dive is any dive that's performed more than 10 minutes after the last dive. If it's less than 10 minutes, if you come to the surface, you've been there for 5 minutes and you start another dive, it's the same dive. It's a continuation of the same dive. Now, one of the things we work about is the dive profile. We always want to make sure we always do our first dives as our deepest dives, and then we do our next dives shallower. Okay? The algorithms that we build are designed to do deepest first to shallower for our repetitive dives. If we do it the other way, you are more likely to get the bends and have issues. And the final term we're going to deal with today is going to be non-decompression limit. Next slide. Next slide. I think we talked about that plenty. Next slide. There we go. Oh, go back. Go back. So, yeah, there we go. So we're going to talk about this more tomorrow, but the non-decompression limits were designed by the Navy. And interestingly enough, the Navy came to the Scripps Institute and the Naval Experimental Diving Unit, and they said, we're having a problem. We need to be able to figure out a dive table that we can send somebody down and they can do a task. So what's the deepest they can do? And the Scripps Institute came back and says, well, how long does it take to do a task? And they said, well, 5 minutes. So how deep can they go and be safe? And they said, well, okay. So what they determined was the average diver should be able to go down to 140 feet and accomplish a task for 5 minutes. Now, we've all been teenage guys. If I told you you could go to 130 feet, what's then going to end up happening? Yeah, most guys are going to go to 135 or 140 feet. If I can tell you, you can only stay at the arcade for 5 minutes. There we go. Exactly. So what they realized very quickly was that we were dealing with the least smart animal on the entire planet, the human male. I hate to say it, men live less than women because we're not as smart as women. If we were smart like women, we'd live longer, but we don't. So what they realized that this is the problem, 140 feet for 5 minutes. But wait a minute. We know that they're not smart, so let's go ahead and add a safety margin. So what they did is they said, okay, they can only go to 130 feet and they can only stay for 5 minutes at 130 feet. So let's add a safety margin. So all of this is built in with a basic safety margin. So as we look at this dive table, we're going to work on just the air. And this is the maximum amount of time I can stay down at any dive in Doppler limits. So for example, at 30 feet, I have a maximum dive time of 205 minutes. If I go to 60 feet, my maximum dive time on air is 50 minutes. Make sense? So this is how I stay in the non-decompression limits. If I cross this, if I go on air to 60 feet for 60 minutes, I'm going to go into a decompression profile, which means I cannot come directly to the surface. I have to do a staged decompression somewhere. It's a much longer class, it's a much more complicated class, and it's a much different type of dive profile. So you need to stay within the non-decompression limit. And just like it looks like, if it's yellow, it's a no-go. So for example, at 30 feet, you can stay for 205 minutes. That's a long freaking dive. At 60 feet, you can stay for 50 minutes. That's the big thing I want you to understand. Non-decompression limits. Next slide. Next slide. There we go. So The other thing we're going to do tomorrow night is we're going to go through equipment checks. We're going to do basic wake checks. We're also going to do a no mask swim. I'm going to have you guys put your regulator in your mouth, and I'm going to teach you to dive without a mask and get comfortable. We're going to do mask drills 1 through 3 in the shallow and the deep. Regular drills 1 through 5 we already went through. Shallow and deep. If we have time, I'm going to get into stationary air share, and I'm going to teach you how to share air in a stationary position. And then we're going to oil inflate our BC, and we're going to have some playtime. My goal tomorrow is for you guys to have an hour worth of skills and about an hour worth of playtime. That is the overall goal. I want you guys to just enjoy this. Nothing worse than going to driver's ed and having to do all parallel parking. How crappy would that class be, right? Let's get on the freeway. Let's do some driving, man, right? So that's what we're going to do. By the way, this is Owen. This is the cutest grandkid a guy could have. Well, one of the 3 cutest grandkids, I guess. We have a new grandkid today. So we're going to have some playtime. Any questions? We went through a lot. Tomorrow is the fun stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide you guys into 2 groups tomorrow when we get. If you guys would, please, please, please be here around 5:30, ready to be, for some of you to be wet by 6 o'clock, because I'd like to try and be in the water for half of you at 6 o'clock. So what I'm probably going to do is put you guys together as a group, and I'll probably put you guys together as a group. So we'll decide who wants to get wet first. So whoever gets here first, whichever group gets here first, and is in can be in swim trunks first, will be the first ones in the water. The other group gets to stay in, and one of my dive guides is going to go through and do class with you. So, and then about 8 o'clock, we're going to get dry, switch, and at 8:30, we're going to take up the second half, or the part 3 of this class. So, sound good? So if you guys could be ready to be in swimwear and ready to go no later than 6 o'clock here. So I would be here at 5:30. Whichever group gets here first gets to choose whether they're going in the pool first or they're doing classroom first. So I'll let you guys arm wrestle it out. What questions you guys have? We went through a lot. What did you learn?
Did most of the homework already.
Nice, good job. What did you learn tonight that you didn't know? Nothing? Everything was old hat for you? What did you learn? Good. How about you?
So I just question the dive tables mean.
You should do a safety stop, but it's an optional safety stop. If you go outside of that, it no longer is a safety stop, it's a deco stop.
Okay.
So it's required. You have no choice. So we want you to stay within that. So if you do blow a safety stop, you're still going to probably be fine. A safety stop just increases your safety margin even further. Good question. Josh, what'd you learn? What you didn't know? Been a while since you've been through my class. Okay. Deb, what'd you learn? Fair enough. How about you, sweetheart? She did. She was cranking. What'd you learn?
I just learned to take my time, I guess. But there's a lot of
Right on. How about you guys? What'd you learn? Yes, it does. But the good news is oxygen toxicity, either pulmonary or central nervous system toxicity, takes a long time. For example, pulmonary oxygen toxicity at 100% oxygen is 12 hours. CNS toxicity, you have at 100% mix, you have 600 minutes before you start getting into an area at 33 feet. And we'll go through that in nitrox class. But you have less chance of the bends, you have more energy after a dive, and you have a safer dive overall. Exactly. Absolutely. Clear out those free radicals and all that. Mhm. If anybody has one of those auction cans, those quick breathe auction cans, and wants to bring it in, I have an auction. I keep an auction analyzer in my truck. We can analyze it out. I'd be willing to bet that, well, it says it's 100%. I'd be willing to bet it is 35 to 40% actual. So, yep, getting that Triton missile. What do you guys think? Good class so far? A lot of information. It gets better from here. Tomorrow night, like I said, we'll be everybody will have 2 hours in the pool at least to learn, play, and get through skills. And then next week, we'll do the exact same thing. We're going to split the on Wednesday. We're going to split the groups again. One group gets 2 hours. It'll be the last classroom, and one group will get 2 hours in the pool, and then we'll switch out. And then Thursday, I don't think you guys could make it next Thursday, but the good news is we'll have gone through all the skills. We will use Thursday to answer questions and give you guys more pool time. So everybody that comes on Thursday is going to get deeper questions to answer, but we'll have already done the final exam, and it's just going to be at 6 o'clock. It's going to be all pool, and we'll play, and I will teach you as much as you want. If you guys want to do advanced techniques like learn frog kick, I will teach frog kick. So yes, yep, on the 14th and 15th. And there's our class schedule. There we go. There's our class schedule. So 5th and 11th, there'll be pool and classroom. The 12th will be the makeup day, and you'll have the opportunity to do all pool, which I encourage strongly, and then open water on the 14th and 15th. So it'll be a fun day for me at the open water because I'll teach you guys, and then I'm doing deco dives afterwards. So fun stuff for me, fun stuff for you. Everybody wins. So I'm going to go out and do some real big dives after I leave you guys with. I've got another class. So I teach a lot. I think I've done 200 certifications this year. So I enjoy this quite a bit. I encourage you guys, if you guys get a chance, go to YouTube, Teach Me to Dive. Go ahead and cut the video.